Okay.
And good evening. This is Tchipakkan, and welcome to the Otherworldly show, the weekly show brought to you by Changing Times, Changing Worlds Conference. And we share topics on all kinds of occult, supernatural, paranormal stuff, things spooky foo, from ghosts to alternate healing, whatever, angels. And tonight we're talking divination. And I am Tchipakkan, your host. And tonight we are going to be talking about divination, and specifically what kinds of divination, if you do more than one kind, what are the pros and cons? How do you pick which one you're going to use? And I have my preferences, I have my my opinions, but that just because it's my show doesn't mean I'm right. Please remember that. Oh gosh, that. And I would love to hear from you. Now, when I think of the most common thing I do, well, okay, probably the most common thing I do is use my intuition. I think you have to learn to trust it. And other than that, the most common thing I use is I do dowsing, which is, let's see if I can put it, if I put it in front of my arm, you can see my little dowsing.
Oh, yeah, that works.
Here we go. Now let me show you. This is can you show me a yes? And can you show me a no? And can people tell that from?
Yeah, we see the difference, and it is in a 90 degree.
Show me a yes.
Yeah. And
show me a no.
Mine goes in circles.
Yeah, and they
show me a maybe.
Those also work.
And you can it's one of the things that that many of the dowsers do is to say, are you can I, is it okay, will you answer this question? Because sometimes they say no, not going to answer it. And you're holding this little thing and it's going to dangle and move around, and watching it go absolutely dead still in the water is like, oh
yeah, it happens.
Doesn't want to talk tonight. Okay. But I will use it for anything as it's good for almost anything that's yes or no. And when we're talking pros and cons, if it's not yes or no, it's kind of a useless thing. You can't get much of a response out of it. But when it comes down to it, almost any divination is a question of asking the right question. It's just that okay, here's a great example. One of the things that I will use it is there anything in this food that I'm allergic to or shouldn't eat? That you can ask. You say, can I eat this, or is this going to cause a reaction? That's both a yes and a no, and that's where it's going to go dead in the water. It's like, again, can't do that. And one variation on dowsing is body kinesiology, which you can use to detect allergies and things like that. Aha, I see somebody's palm.
No, that was mine. I was
just checking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
The main problem I have, it's actually coming out pretty good.
I've taken the pictures on my phone of both my hands, and I could always do it by sharing.
I have thrown pictures on, put my hand on my printer and printed that. You know what? It doesn't work very well. It's
the hand's a little bit curved. That's something I picked up from Kathy for 20 years.
I just bought myself a pad.
Not that I would know, but don't sit on one.
No. When
no.
when you are
especially the laser ones, it'll give you a sunburned butt.
Really?
Not that I would know.
Not that you would know.
Oh no.
When I was when you're doing a palm print, and personally I like doing a palm print because especially if you're reading your own hand, it's a lot easier to, you can look at those lines. I also recommend people take a palm print every year or two, because then you can see that the lines on your hands change. This to me is a very, very cool thing that I will call into any other reading when people start thinking, oh my gosh, my life, I've got this horrible doom upon me. And
Do you enjoy the extra wrinkles on your face as well?
yes, you can read those. It's a different system. I started believing it when one of my mother's friends, I was trying to learn molosophy, where the placement of moles on your body. I think it's a cool thing if you chart them and you suddenly have a bunch of them, you probably ought to tell your doctor. But she had one on her left earlobe, which, is that left or right? No, right, left, yeah. And it was, that is the mark of somebody who is going to be catapulted way above their station in life. And she was a farmer's daughter who became a multimillionaire's wife, and no one could have possibly deserved it more. She was the most wonderful woman.
Yeah, it still is.
One interesting way of looking at your palm is, I didn't do palm prints, but when I was in kindergarten, one of our exercises was we did plaster imprints of our hands. I've since lost the thing, but I remember trying to fit my hand into it years later. And in the meantime, the detail it preserved was amazing.
Those were great. Your parents hung them on the wall?
No, I just kept mine.
Oh, you just kept your, they didn't paint it, they didn't.
Well, all the boys got theirs painted blue, and all the girls got theirs painted pink. Got to remember,
That's very sad.
This is 1955.
This is a long time ago, so
yeah,
see, we can live with that.
In a galaxy far, far away.
But
Obviously not Florida.
yeah. Anyway, but yes, you can tell some of the things from that, but the cool thing that I show people is, if you look at your two hands, and I will stop in the middle of a card reading or stop in the rune reading and something to show them, your hand that is dominant constantly changes. I have a friend who reads palms a lot, Star Wolf's wife, who has seen them change mid-reading. If you do something that is going to change the direction of your life, it changes what your future is going to be. I have changed things. If you can see mine, and I'm not sure you can in this light.
If you go to the top right and choose speaker mode and Tchipakkan talks, you will see her hand more clearly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let me try pinning that and see. But if you can see, here we have, this is my lifeline, and shows that I'm going to be dead past the 7. Basically, your palm is set up for about 70 years. It's not set up for more than that. And can you see on this one, it basically stops right about there, and then it'll start again down at the bottom, but I was supposed to have been dead about 35. And I did something, and that changed. So, and so I will show people. I said, look, you change your hands. You change the lines. The lines show what's most likely to happen. If you, most forms of divination are not unlike a medical diagnosis or a meteorology report. It's given the current circumstances, this what's most likely to happen next. And it will tell you far into the future how many children you're going to have, how often you're going to get married, things like that. But it is changeable depending on what you do with your life. So I will often just take a quick side trip to remind people that you can change your life. Now, I have developed, borrowing a term from birders called jizz. which is their cute little acronym for general appearance, size, and shape. And of course, they call it, and it's spelled JIZZ because they're being cute and it's an in joke to them.
Yeah.
But general appearance, size, and shape does tell you a whole lot about your hand. And palmistry, the most useful aspect of palmistry is the size, shape, color, and the general conformation. You can do this without looking at the little lines very easily. And remember that the lines are going to shape. I keep thinking this would be a great tool for anybody in human resources who's doing hiring.
You have
Look
the
at their
red
hand
palm.
and say, this person is methodical. This person is adventurous. This person is a rule breaker. This person is probably going to take orders well. This person is, that would be very useful, but God help the company that anybody found out was using palmistry to do in their hiring.
Do you have the red palms?
That indicates that you have a vitality. That's actually usually a good sign for your health. And if you have very white palms, it's an indication that you're not.
Mom, Kate, and I have bright red palms. They call them. They also call them the red palms of pregnancy, but I guarantee you, I'm not. And I just wondered, it's a hereditary thing, so I wondered if you had them.
Well, I don't. But, and also another thing you can do, can we do this?
Yeah.
See, you can make them white by stretching them. So, and if you're going to read your palms,
but you see what color my palm is?
Yeah, it's pink.
Stretched. It's red.
There.
I have red palms.
Yep, and she does. And you can, but so you can do the you can, and I'd suggest people go out and practice this on in subways and in public, where you can tell a whole lot about a person from their palm shape across the room. And that is if you have very long fingers, that indicates you've got more, you're more intellectual. If you have a broad palm, that makes you more, it's very square, it makes you more practical. If it's, see mine is wider at the bottom than it is at the top, that's spatulate, but that means I have an active mind. If you have it's wider at the top and it's narrow at the bottom, that's a spatulate in the physical part, and you are probably a lot better taking an outdoors job that has a lot of physical activity. If you have short fingers, and the people say, well, how do you know if they have short fingers? Okay, my fingers, so let's go for the tall one, down, only goes, it's only that long in my, with my palm. I've got like a longer than wide palm, and it's longer than my fingers are tall. If you know the basic concept of the elements in astrology, this is what they call a fire hand. The fire people tend to change everything that they get into. If you have long fingers on a long hand, that's a water. If you have long fingers on a short hand or a square hand, that's an air. If you have short fingers on a short palm, that's an earth hand. And that tells you, if you know the earth, air, fire, and water symbolism, gives you a beginning aspect of looking at their hands. If you look at things, how far, when you hold your hand out, how far does your thumb, when shake it, don't look at it and then say, okay, comfortable. How far out does your thumb stick from your hand? Some people keep their thumbs like that. That indicates a person who plays their cards close to their chest. Somebody like this, it's an open mind. Sometimes, sometimes if you have an open, if it goes down more than 90-degree angle, that's when your mind is so open, your brain might fall out. Yeah, it's just there are little things like that. You can see a big bulbous end on your thumb gives you an argumentative position. You see, I don't have my thumb is just fairly straight and columnar. Most people have a bit of a waist on their thumb, that's your tact. I know how to spell tact, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Some people just don't have it, and some people do. I must say, my own defense, it's gotten better. Yay! I'm happy. If the bottom joint in your phalanges, your fingers, is big and puffy, that means you love food. So there's lots and lots of cool things you can tell with palmistry. On the other hand, look, an average hand will not be wider than 5 inches by 5 inches. That gives you 25 square inches to cover everything in your life. You're only going to get an overview. I will tell you this from having read more palms than I care to have read. I find it really annoying because about the only thing I can tell them, other than the inevitable question, how long will I live? How often will I get married, and how many children will I have? Basically what you get is a quick overview, and remember, they change. But your character generally doesn't change a lot, and that's useful. But I tell you, if you have total stranger comes up to you, wants their palm read, you read their palm and you tell them about themselves, they kind of go, oh my God. And occasionally you get the people who say, doesn't sound like me. And frequently there's a friend behind them going, because it does work. But one of the things I know that Kathy tells people is if she comes across someone who has the mark of the empath on their hand, and you can tell whether they are an shuttered empath or a completely, or whether they're out. She can tell them how to put shields up, and that will change the rest of their lives, because an unshielded empath is a person in pain. And so things like that, if you can have, the palmistry is really good for telling you what you can do with your life that will make it easier on you, because it's what you're doing. Bill Griffin, what did you need to contribute?
After comparing looking at your hand a lot, and the fact that I bought a book on palmistry back late high school, early college days, I realized I have a rather unusual hand. I was curious. Let's see if I can get it.
Okay, well, pull it back just a little bit. Okay, you definitely you've got an air hand. You're an intellectual. You tend to overthink things, and you're very, very practical. If we look at your palm itself is square, but and you are a bit of a romantic, that I can tell from the lines on your hands. And you see the little crook in your Jupiter finger. That means that you like to study, but you want to apply it to the real world. So there's things like that you can find. Your hand, I can't see the lines very well, and every so often I see one where the lines are so unusual that I can't necessarily read them. Okay.
Yeah, it's got a W down on the bottom there.
Sorry, was there something you wanted me to see that I haven't?
Well, basically, I seem to have a lot of very strong lines, and the M is something you can read across the room.
Everybody has an M.
Everybody has an M. My lifeline, I believe, pretty long, and it was interesting to see. Of course, my fingers are very long. My piano teacher thought that was wonderful, because I can actually stand more than an octave on the piano. So that was basically, I was curious what your impression was, because I look at the hand these very long fingers. So that was basically it. I was curious, since you've had a lot of real world practical experience, what you thought of the hands. That's quite interesting because a lot of what you just said rings true.
Yeah. I first found it in college. We used to, when I was first getting into divination, and we would read each other's palms and we would read cards a lot. And we would discover, Sarah, I'll get to you. And that was when I discovered, as I was reading people's palms from week to week, that the lines will change. And that is a very cool thing. And but as I said, Kathy has seen them change during a reading. And that's because if you change the direction of your life, the lines change, which I think is very cool, because it can tell you if you are trying to change something in your life, it'll tell you if you have.
Anyway, I had a question.
Yes.
If we want to move to me next.
Yes, let's move
I had surgery a year or two ago on my hand to release the trigger finger, and he found a line here and put the scar, put the incision right along it. Now, having a scar there, will that affect, since it's going to be somewhat more permanent?
No, it actually doesn't. The scar will be, you read it as a scar.
Okay.
It's like somebody said, oh, it's okay, this black spot, a black spot on a line is supposed, especially if it's on the headline, is supposed to indicate injury to the head. And it says, yeah, well, that's where I stuck somebody stuck me with a pencil in school, and they kind of tattooed it. So,
okay.
it's like, oh, well, then I think we don't have to pay attention to that.
Okay.
I once had it could have an effect on your hand. There is a palmist who has something called palm therapy, where if there is a line you don't like, they have you stroke it to in where you want it to be. It's essentially to push it to where you want it to be, to get it to be in the direction you want it to be. So
that's interesting, because sometimes I wind up stroking it because the scar tissue still feels tight sometimes.
yes.
So I wind up stroking it to loosen it. So that's similar. Okay.
But I'm not still convinced whether or not that is actually it works, but I know you can change lines. So why the heck, I'm not sure that touching the lines, but they do say the reason the lines are there is because they are an indication of the energy that is flowing, like your meridians. It's kind of an external meridian that can be read. Another thing about palmistry, which you see is your nails. I always read the nails first, because if I haven't even touched their nails, and if you look at your nails and there's a white part at the very bottom, they call that the moon.
Yeah.
If you haven't even touched their hands and you say, oh, you've got bad circulation, which is what I say if your moons have disappeared. If they touch their hands and their hands are cold, then they might say, well, that's why you knew. But if I haven't even touched their hands yet, of course, they got fingernail polish, I can't tell. And you tend to lose them first from the pinky, and then over to the ring finger, and then over to the Jupiter and the, sorry, I'm switching.
Okay.
I'm trying to be vernacular.
That's what I'm seeing.
Not everyone knows the palmistry terms.
That's what I'm seeing here. Yeah, I probably can't see it on the screen.
So if you have bad circulation, the moons go away. Yeah, that I would definitely say you had poor circulation.
Yeah,
and
I've got some of them.
And different things. Doctors will read an awful lot of those things too. But you get the shape of your nails will show whether you have a predisposition. Usually, it's hereditary, toward lung problems or heart problems or various other problems, and that'll go by the shape of your nails. And so it's useful, practical for your health, for your personality. Yes, it will show things that are going to happen to you, but because we know those are going to mineral and vitamin deficiencies, absolutely. Anyway, so if you want to answer a specific question, tarot is my go-to. Well, if it's not the yes, no, you can get a really fast one. Of course, with tarot, you can also answer a yes, no question, which makes it really great for fairs. Personally, I prefer tarot for fairs over palmistry because because I don't have to touch the person. And if I'm touching them, you get, not only do you get the things that you can read. See, if you get a palm print, you can read all the lines and you can get it very precise that way. But if you get if you are reading it sitting, holding their hand, you can end up picking up things because you're touching them and you're getting psychic reading off of them too. And if you're changing customers every 15 minutes, that means you have to be really good at breaking that link you have made to them. And so with the cards, you're just reading them, and I find it a lot less tiring. Other people will be able to, other people tell me that they don't find palmistry. Star Wolf's wife, brilliant palmist, probably the best I've met. But she doesn't find it exhausting to read palms all day in a fair, which I do. So, what was your question?
I was thinking about, you talked about nails. What do you make of the fact that I seem to go through these cycles lasting weeks and sometimes months, where my nails go from being very strong to being very brittle? And they're going through the brittle phase right now, and the lunate, I only see them on a couple of fingers. So
you have just been through a bad medical time, and that will probably show up. One of the things that one of the signs that you see that both doctors and palmists read is if you look at the profile of the nail.
Oh, yeah.
If you had something serious, shows up very much in if you've had a major injury or chemo, and chemo shows up and you get this ripple effect.
Yes.
Sideways, goes across the palms as it's growing, because it essentially stops growing. Same thing that makes the hair fall out when people get chemo. You get a little ridge, and then it goes another ridge when you get your next round, and another ridge, and they grow out gradually.
Yeah, and I was aware of that, but after I was discharged,
did I say that?
I got back to having strong nails, but now they've gone brittle again.
Well,
and I feel otherwise better than I've been in a long time.
Yeah, well, it's a beginning. The thing is that with anything health problem, nutrition is so much a part of it, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than eat better and supplement. Something that we do need to know is that you have to, as you get older, you don't absorb the nutrients as well. So you have, that's when you really kind of have to start supplement. Also, like when you're pregnant, you need a little bit extra. So, but that's palmistry. I also want to get to tarot and runes. That's where I'm going to turn sideways and say, unless there are any other questions, I would talk a little bit about palmistry. I mean, having talked about, I think I've covered palmistry pretty well. I have to mention astrology. One of the things that I think we should learn astrology because it gives the language. We learn enough astrology to learn the symbolism of it, but remember that the solar-based astrology that is in the newspapers is pretty much butt kiss. It's the whole concept that you are going to be exactly like 1/12 of the population of the planet is so foolish. But we can learn certain things, and so that if you get into astrology, you can get more out of it. But everybody, I think, should learn the basics of astrology so that it's the magical language of the West. Also, I think numerology, because that also carries over into many of the other aspects of magical thought. but having said that, then you go to you see this in tarot, because a lot of the tarot as it's done these days is based a lot on the Colton Smith tarot that was done by the magical lodges of the late 19th century. And they did a whole lot of magical correspondences and worked with numbers and astrological signs and things like that. I get a little cranky because a lot of people will force correspondences. You can see this in runic tarot decks where they say, oh, well, they have several things that are similar in rune sets and in the tarot. So we'll just try and we'll line those up and then crowbar in the ones that the
term is kludge.
Occur in runes that don't occur in tarot, and no worry about it. Well, no, sorry, that doesn't work. Don't force the correspondences. At very least, you're going to annoy Tchipakkan. It's like teaching a pig to sing. You waste your time and annoys the pig. Before it just occurs to me, I've got Will Linden here. Do you
Yes.
have anything? This is an astrologer of some talent, and do you have anything else that you would think that ought to be said about astrology and its benefits, its strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I'm very fond of horary astrology, which is the purely fortune-telling aspect of it. You cast a chart for the moment in response to because that's the horoscope of the question. And especially in Sir William Lilly's Christian astrology, he offers immense detail on how to interpret various classes of questions.
I like orrery astrology too. Chris LaFond has taught some things about it at Changing Times, and it's the one that's most immediately useful. Would you also say that the orrery astrology most immediately? Would you say that the hi, I'm an Aquarius, what's your sign? That type of astrology is pretty useless?
Yes.
Yeah.
I get very annoyed because the astrology space on Quora keeps getting taken up with people saying, why does a Virgo woman, why can't I talk to this Sagittarius man, etc., etc. And I get tired of repeating sun sign is only one factor.
And to
Amen
me,
to
I
that.
think your moon sign tells more about you.
Matthew has a point to make or a question to ask.
A question for Will, if I may.
Okay, there we go.
Now, I'm not big on I'm not big. I'm not knowledgeable in astrology per se, but I do use the zodiacal correspondences with relation to behavioral patterns, or at least general behavioral patterns, when I'm trying to figure out from somebody's birthday what like their behavioral traits when they're joining my classes. I get to know the people before I meet them. But question, can you comment about the traditional zodiacal positions and associations versus this new skewed version that came out? According to I think what was the reason for it was
If you mean
polar tilt or something like that.
If you mean that stuff about Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, that's nonsense, because the constellations are not nice, neat 30-degree sectors like the sign. And it would have saved us a lot of angst and bickering if Ptolemy had just named the signs Alpha, Beta, and so forth.
Yes, but they were Roman, so they're not going to use the Phoenician. So,
But he was a Hellenistic Greek, Hellenistic
And he-
Egyptian.
but once you have a bunch of symbols to use, there you go. You are you can do things, and tarot, I kind of look at it as a combination of astrology, European folklore, and numerology all bundled together in a neat little pack of cardboard, which is very portable.
And depending on whose tarot uses a good chunk of the Kabbalah in there too.
Mm-hmm. And
then bloody Iwas comes in and tries confusing everybody with his Sadi is not the star.
Do you expect
something I don't see any reason for?
What do you expect from crazy Uncle Alistair?
I'm going to recommend for people who might want to take it up for the first time is Robin Wood's tarot deck, because in her book, I started out with oh Lord, was it very basic one, but in her book she includes why she chose to use certain colors, why she chose to use certain symbols, and that makes it a lot easier for a new person to remember it and to start learning it. And they say, oh, okay, then blue means this, and blue means and when I see red, it means that, and so the staffs mean that. It's like, okay, fine, and that gives you. But you got to remember that, especially with the trumps, and I find this useful to remember, is things change. The whole symbolism of strength, where you have the woman who is holding a lion's mouth shut, and that shows the spiritual trumping the physical, except that originally that was Samson wrestling a lion, and sometimes in the earlier tarot it was Samson knocking down the pillars of the temple. Cool. But because he was shown with long hair, it was, and very crudely, frequently, some later people knew it was strength, knew that it meant the spiritual overcoming the physical, and they just, it's a woman who's able to subdue a lion.
Okay.
And they forgot that it was Samson, and so that it got if you look at some of the older decks, the hangman is labeled Il Traitore, meaning the traitor, and people at the time knew that hanging somebody from one foot was the death given to traitors. Now we can now look at the concept of the traitor, the concept of seeing the world differently from other people will lead you to being called traitor. But now we look at this and say, oh, this is the person who is willing to sacrifice in order to gain spiritual knowledge. Well, okay, but sometimes it's awfully hard to unlearn something once you.
Well, yeah.
And when I saw the Marseille image for the lovers, I immediately thought, oh, that's depicting the story of the choice of Hercules.
And we don't know what their symbolisms were. And the more we learn about symbols, the more layered any given reading becomes. It's very cool. Symbolism and learning to use it. Well, the only thing I really liked about the Golden Compass, because the levels of symbolism in it. So yes, that's how it works. And then the story made me very annoyed. And the movie got worse. Oh my goodness. But if you want to ask something, and you can tailor your readings. Now most people start out by learning the Celtic cross, which gives you some really good basic information about anything. What two things are in opposition that's creating the problem? What's below it? What's behind it? What happened in the past? What's going to happen in the future? What's the best possible outcome? What's the situation at home? What are you bringing to the situation? What's the final outcome going to? These are good basic things. And by combining the meaning of the card and the meaning of the position that you've laid it down in, you can get some good readings. You can answer questions. I'm not going to say that we don't get what I refer to as stubborn cards. Stubborn cards are the cards who, when the little girl comes in and she wants to know if Bobby loves her and tell me about my love life, it's going to tell her about her schoolwork and her potential future. If you don't stop concentrating on the football team, then you are not going to get into the college you want to get into, and you're going to end up not having the life you want. So, but the cards frequently, you know, you might be wanting to find out about money and they want to tell you about your love life. You can't, what you can do at that point is, after you say, okay, I hear you, Wes, now will you tell me about your love life, and get another one. You can do that. And but it gives you specific. And one of the things modern tarot readers do is come up with new readings. And they can take any symbolism. I've seen symbolism based on Star Trek. I have seen symbolism based on, what you give me any set of cultural icons, and they will have made a deck about it. And there, people will add cards. Remember, so the ones like justice and temperance came from virtues that were often used in allegorical situations in the Renaissance, that we have. They took out some of the other chastity and some of the other ones they used, but at least 5 decks that I know of have added the happy squirrel, which was made up in a Simpsons episode, but it was so perfect as a symbol of something that looks soft and cute but will mess you up, that 5 different people who have drawn tarot decks have added it to theirs.
That's like the deck I use, which has not just some extra majors, but an entire extra minor suit.
Wow. What's your extra minor suit?
It is the suit of Aura, which, according to Piers Anthony, that deals with the psychic and the spiritual and leaves cups to deal with feelings and emotions. It also, if you use significators, gives redheads their own deck as opposed to lumping them into wands with the blondes.
Well, I kind of given up on the whole using it to describe people physically.
Well, it's useful when I'm seeing people in other people's readings, and every now and again, if it pops up in the right place, I get to use the King of Coins as I see a tall, dark stranger in your future.
Yeah. We have one of the things I noticed I used in college was the Aquarian Tarot, which
I've got a copy of that.
Yeah, so do I.
Peter Max poster type style.
Yes.
But had little squishy faces that were very faint and you could hardly see what they did. 3 of the other girls I was hanging with also had that. And one day we pulled out our cards and we looked at them, and the faces had changed. Now, let's face it, all of these have been printed on the same freaking printing press. But her Knight of Wands or something always represented her boyfriend, and it had started looking like him. And we put these the identical cards side by side, and the little squishy started to change, and that was really weird. So, but you know, weirdness happens.
All right.
Another another thing that speaking of changing in cards, in the 21st century, the Lenormand has come up. It was a fortune telling deck that would actually, I think they included them in cigarette boxes, and you can gradually get your whole fortune telling deck by in your cigarette. But it came off of reading from just playing card decks, and then they added some basic symbols, the house, the tree, the ship, the key, the book, and a man and a woman, many of the modern decks have added an extra man and a woman so that you can have your romantic partner will turn up. So that you can have both if it can, and they have some decks that have Black or African American and Caucasian character, so that it makes it easier to read. You incorporate all of the options that you kind of need to read modern people's readings.
One of the Lenormand I have has an older man and a woman and a younger man and a woman.
And so the artists and the producers are responding to what is necessary to get a good reading out of it. You can read almost anything. There's an entire another section on oracle decks where you can get all kinds of readings from them. I Ching is another one that gives you a really great reading, but it takes a while. I know Kathy does it with the coins. I got the yarrow rods and started to do with geomancy is another thing that you have to tap in the dirt, and very big in the Middle Ages, but it's almost gone away because, let's face it, modern people are impatient and they don't want.
One of the things I like about it is actually you can use it with any procedure, which will give you odd or even results.
Yeah, that's
Let's
true.
say I'm looking at a passage of text and I count the word lengths.
Yeah. So, but we're closing in. I really have to cover the runes as well, because that's another popular one. And it's one I end up doing a lot at shows because not as many people do the runes. A lot of people really want to have them done. I do most rune sets ever since Ralph Bloom took them out and sold a little bag with a little ceramic tiles with runes
And a
on
book. Yep.
with a book. Suddenly people were doing the runes again. I use rune sticks. The nice thing about rune sticks is when you toss them, they fall, and I teach this to people. They will fall. You only throw 1/8 at a time, and so they will fall into. But if you had absolutely blank runes, they could fall into runes. If you had any sticks, and I have and make them out of coffee stirrers and popsicle sticks, and they will work. And what you want to do is, if you get more nuanced reading by reading how the combination of, if it falls into a fehu that is made up with a tier, a lagu, and a york, then you can see how it becomes a much more, you said, oh, okay, how those work. Modern people are often, especially I think when they're learning, but also just as an exercise, that even it's like all of the great musicians still practice their scales every day, because practice keeps you flexible and good. So I've noticed that Star Wolf is doing a 3 rune reading, which he has been sharing on Facebook, which I think is fascinating, because I watch and see how he interprets the 3 different runes, and I see how I would interpret those 3 different runes. I was reading them once at a event, and in order to allow people to hold the bag, I brought 3 different bags of the pebble types, because they're giving them to me. And somebody had pulled out hoggle, which is pretty much okay, duck and cover rune. And so I said, okay, look, here, let's set that bag aside, and you pull, instead of pulling, you pull the next one from the other bag. And he pulled out another hoggle, and I said, okay, let's see if we can break that pattern, get the third bag, which I actually had to take back from the person behind him. It's like, and he pulled out the third hoggle, and I said, okay, you're screwed. It's like, your next year is going to be full of all kinds of upsets. And you're going to have to be flexible and you're determined, and you're just going to have to ride this one out, because if you pull hoggle, it's like,
I'd love to see what else would have come out.
if you'd had a fourth one.
Well, if he pulled more out of one bag.
Yes, I probably should have done that, but I was just,
I could see that also as there's some old patterns that need to be broken now.
and the next year he came back and told me about what a wild ride he'd had.
Yeah.
And that it was useful to have. Now, my daughter Willow does what she calls bad news readings. She does a straight psychic reading. She'll take the person's hands, wait, it's like, okay, what am I getting? What am I getting? And she will tell them, okay, you should get your car to the garage. It's not dead yet, but if you don't get it treated, if you don't get it seen to right away, you're going to have an expensive repair. Okay, so your daughter is lying to you, but it's nothing important. Oh, I see you surrounded by fire, but it's not, nobody gets hurt and it's not dangerous, but you're completely surrounded by fire. And he said, well, I cook. And he came back the next year and said, yes, it was a big fire in the restaurant I worked. And I put it out, and the bosses fired me, and I now have a much better job. And so she just does those what she calls bad news readings, because that's all she picks up. It's kind of like, if you're going to the surface level, what she's going to get is the red flags. And so that's what you get to see when
Interesting.
she's doing that. So that's another thing that you can use. What other, okay, I just have to, we're getting close to the end. I want to know if anybody else has, I've given you my pros and cons. Anybody else have what they consider pros and cons of different forms?
Henry in the chat mentioned geomancy,
Yeah,
which sounds intriguing to me.
Which the few times I've done it tends to be the most depressing
Really?
collection of doom, gloom, and disaster.
Now, is it, when they say geomancy, it's not geography, it's geology, right?
It's
it's kind of like it's not unlike I Ching. It's
It's the Western version.
Okay.
It's creating certain figures out of even and odds, and
Oh, okay.
you're essentially making even on. It was called geo because you were making dots in the sand, so you could do it anywhere with just a stick or any kind of pointer.
Huh.
Oh,
Okay.
And you do it randomly, so you knew how you didn't know how many times you had made them. Then you'd count them, and then
Okay.
even, and they'd do that 8 times, and you'd get a figure, and then you would do that. You do it again, and you get another figure, and then you would read the figures.
Okay. I was totally off on what I thought it was, because when I was in high school, I read about a divination method where you took various crystal stones and you threw them and saw where they landed.
That is also called geomancy.
Oh,
It's
okay.
called neuromancy. There's cartomancy is any of the card reading. Bibliomancy is where you put your either you put a pointer into a book and open it, or you let a book fall open and you put your finger down and read it. That used to be use Virgil. That was what the Romans used when they did.
Yes, that appears in Gargantua and Pantagruel.
Yeah.
And following that, there's a chapter where Panurge visits Herr Trippa. who tells him he is infallibly going to be a cuckold and offers to confirm it by 39 methods of divination,
Brilliant.
39?
including anthropomancy.
Oh,
And then if there's, of course, there's augury, which is reading omens. You know, and I stepped outside my my window and there was a crow giving me a hard time, Bill. and,
So the old man was after you too, huh?
anyway, and so there's a lot that's interpreting the what you see in the fire, what you see in the clouds, what you see in your dreams. Let's face it, your dreams are often trying to, your subconscious or your spirit guides or your dead relatives trying to communicate with you while you've got your brain turned off. It's also something that your brain will occasionally be just giving you a hard time, or giving you a chance to have some to have some fun. Unfortunately, in dream interpretation, the dream you're most likely to be able to remember is not the one that woke you up in the middle of the night, but the one that you had the last one just before you woke up, and you're lying in bed saying, geez, the floor is cold, but I have to pee. And you're trying to you remember what did I dream? And the ones that you did the last ones, or after you have done all your heavy work, all the psychological work, all the spiritual psychic work, you do generally in the middle of the night. And the last one is simply you've gone to dream playground, so it's not usually as useful. So what other things are there? Anyway, but
Good night, Starwolf.
Bye-bye.
oh, good night. Yes.
so we should, I should tie this up. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to contribute? I'm sorry, I did not mean to make this a Tchipakkan show.
Well,
That's okay. We've been all over interesting departments here.
yeah, I picked up on a couple of themes here that I thought were interesting, because I have tried different divination methods and none of them have really worked for me. And I just don't get a connection. Now with the tarot, I've gone through several decks, admired them tremendously, but I can't get them to work. And I keep watching all the new decks coming out, and I wonder, is there one for somebody like me whose grip on this is barely by the fingernails?
Mhm.
But the idea of understanding the symbolism, and I think that's what tripped me up, because I look at the Rider-Waite, and you have to study the bejesus out of that to figure out what some of it means.
I should
Whereas-
lend you my broke pitch deck for a while, and you
Okay,
can.
I'm going to give you one hint that will probably be very nice. That will probably help you, and then I think I'm going to turn off the recording. One of the things that I will do if I am reading tarot at a fair is I will pack my old tarot book, the basic
The ones by
now it's
Eden
basically-
Gray.
which
The ones by Eden Gray.
Gray, yeah, that's the one. And I pack that. And if none of the things I'm saying, if the person still has that blank look on their face, I will pull it out and I will say, look, I would much rather have you get a good read than I would like to look smart. And we will both open it up to the card that is causing trouble and read down. And it's got about 6 or 7 different alternative readings. And we'll get down to the 5th or 6th, and they'll say, that's exactly what's going on. And I was like, okay, now
we know.
now we know. And so that is I think to me, the key is that you get a good reading, not that you it's like that. Why I don't like palmistry. It's I don't need to prove that this shit works to people who are wondering if it does. I want to give them useful information.
Mhm.
The whole point of divination is that you've asked all your friends, you've gone to Google, you can't think of any other way of gathering information. That's when you pull out the runes or the tarot cards or the dowsing on. So anyway, that's it for tonight. I will talk to you guys again next week, and I'm not going to turn off the Zoom. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Forget to we are to tell your friends about the Otherworldly, and the ones who might be interested. I don't have any idea where the teeny boppers came from.